Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. This is Michelle. Today we are going to automate a common task that drives everyone crazy, which is merging multiple Excel files into a single spreadsheet. By the end of this video, you have a workflow that does this in minutes. Ready? Let's dive in. First, let's open up UiPath Studio and create a new project. We will create a new process and then let's name it merge multiple files into a sheet. Then create. For the first step, we need to tell the workflow where our files are located. I have put 3 sample files in the directory where our workflow is located. In our workflow, we will first get all the files from that directory and then assign it to a variable. So the first activity we need is the assign activity. And then in the value to save, we will use this function directory the get files. And then the first argument we need is the path of the file, which is the current path of the workflow. And then the second argument is the files that we need to grab. So the patterns will be all the files with extension of CSV because we have saved all the files in CSV. So we will get all the files with CSV extension. And then we save this. And the variable that we are going to save this to will call this variable file names. And then we'll save this as a variable using Control K. Then you see it is automatically saved to a string type, but because we have multiple files in the directory, so we need to change this variable type to an array. So an array of string. So we'll save all the files, the file names into an array. And next, we need a for each loop to loop through each file we have in our directory. So let's grab the for each activity for each. So for each item in file names, which is the variable we set above, we will then get all the workbook sheets within the file. So the next activity we need to use the get workbook sheets is Excel application scope. So we need this activity, and this is a classic activity. And then the workbook path is the item. And then in the do section, we will get workbook sheets, and then we'll save all the workbook sheets that we got from each file into a variable called sheets. Control K. Oops. And then this will be saved to a list of string. Then the next, once we get all the sheets in a file, we will then look through each sheet and get the data within the sheet. So the next activity we need is another for each loop. So we will grab for each activity again. So for each item in sheets, we will then read the data within the sheet. So we'll need an activity called read range. Then we'll update the sheet name into whatever sheet's name given in the file. So, but make sure you convert it to string, and then the range will be everything within the file, so we don't need to specify any value here, so we leave it as it is. Then the next thing we need to do is to output it into a data table. We'll output it into a temporary data table. We'll call it dt_temp. Okay, oops, dt_temp. Control K. And then this is set as a data table variable type. So once we've read the data within each sheet, the next thing we need to do is to merge dt_temp into our main table. So we first need to create another data table. We'll call it dt_mean. So we'll need another activity to initialize our dt_main. So we need an if activity. So how we initialize is that if dt_main, and then we need to save this as a variable first. If dt_main is nothing, then we'll clone the dt_temp and then save it as dt_main. So we need an assign activity, and then in the value, just 1 second. Okay, for some reason dt_main was set as a boolean variable type, which is incorrect. We need to change it to data table for the error to disappear. Okay, so now we can say dt_temp dot clone and then dt_main. So if dt main is nothing, then we clone dt tame. And then the next activity we need is to merge dt tame into dt main. So we will need an activity called merge data table, where we merge the source of dt tame into destination of dt main. And then after each merge, we clear the table of dt tame. So we need another activity called clear data table, and then we need to clear dt tame after merging. And that is all for the first part. The main part of the workflow is almost done. So the last part is to obviously save the data that we have stored in the data table into a file. So we will need to write the data table into a file. We need Excel application scope again. And then here we will give a file name for our new file. I'll call it final file.csv. And then we need an activity called write range, where we write the data from data table main, dt main, into the first sheet, which I'll just leave it as sheet 1. And then we will write from first cell, which is A1. So we need to make sure dt main is in the right scope. We'll move this into the highest level, which is the main sequence. So now we have no more error. So it's time to run the workflow and see what we get. So let's run the workflow. File 1 does not exist. Oh, thought I changed it. So for some reason it is saved as current text, so we need to change it to item, because we're using item in our read range activity. Let's double check. So let's save this as a Excel file. Okay, let's run the workflow. Let's check in our folder. We can see our final file here. Let's see what we get in the file. So we get everything from all 3 files you can double check. So I have different email address in each file. So I know we get all the data we have in each file. So we get the data from first file. We also get the data from second file, which is ABCC. And then we also get the data from our last file, which is 100, 200, 300, 400. So that is all. It is so easy, and it's gonna save you a ton of time if you have more than 3 files, obviously. That's the point of creating a workflow, is to save you time handling lots of data and lots of files. And also in a regular basis, if it's a recurring task that you have to do every other week or every other month, this will be a good workflow to have, so that all you need to do is open the workflow and just click on the run, and then you get the final file with all the data you need from all the files that you put into the folder. So it makes life so much easier, and then you get to enjoy doing other more interesting tasks at work, hopefully. And that's it. You have just built yourself a workflow to merge multiple Excel files into a single spreadsheet in UiPath. If this saved you time, please hit the like button and subscribe for more automation tips. Now, here's a sneak peek for next time. Ever had a cell with values separated by commas or semicolons, and you needed to split them into multiple rows? In the next video, I am going to show you exactly how to do it in UiPath. Trust me, it's going to be a game changer to clean up those messy data. If you have any questions or ideas for the next tutorial, please let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. Until then, keep automating the boring stuff. I'll see you next time. Ciao.